Patrick, this has been dubbed the biggest mass action since 1994. Why? We haven't seen it. We haven't seen the numbers.
Well, we will know by tomorrow if that is true. But
you want it to be the biggest mass
action?
Certainly
want it to be, and I'm confident that it will, because these are two issues on which people feel so strongly. Labour broking has been a big problem for the trade unions for many, many years, and I think a lot of workers have just been itching to take action against this, and it's getting worse. More and more previously relatively secure, relatively well-paid jobs are being replaced by casual, generally low-paid jobs with no benefit, and absolutely no security. And this is the biggest problem, that workers are being sort of traded by these companies with no certainty as to whether they'll even have a job next week or next month.
Yeah. Now, you're proposing tomorrow that there will be 32 marches across the country. And in fact, effectively, what you're doing tomorrow is you are shutting down the country, if you're successful, the economy in part. Now, some would argue that that's against jobs creation, because what you're doing is you're losing production at the same time that you want actually companies to be functioning normally so they create jobs.
Of course, the trade unions would always prefer not to go on strike.
Would they?
For the very reason.
But they would have no reason if they didn't strike, because they have to keep striking to check their strength, to gauge their strength.
But when you're involved in a dispute, and the people you're in dispute with remain adamant, you're sometimes left with absolutely no alternative. And this is the case. Particularly on the e-tolling issue, we would have thought by now the government would have sensed the level of opposition. And indeed, the Minister of Finance's budget speech did reflect that, that he'd taken note of this.
Yes.
But he mysteriously only went halfway and made a small reduction in the amount he was going to charge, and didn't deal with the objection in principle to having to pay to use roads which have always been freely available.
But Patrick, the point is someone has to pay for it. If we don't pay for it directly through e-tolling fees, etc., it will have to come somewhere from all of us.
But for decades,
where do you want it to come from?
For decades, we've been paying for our roads through taxation, and in particular the fuel levy, which originally was supposed to be specifically for improving our roads. Why all of a sudden do we have to change that and turn what should be public assets into opportunities for people to make a profit? And it looks as though Sanral and the various companies it's negotiated with, and we still don't know what they negotiated because those agreements are secret, are going to make a great deal of money, which we believe we shouldn't have to pay.
Why do you think the government is doing it this way?
They obviously are worried about the impact on the budget.
Right.
But there's no way of avoiding that. And again, the government has given a great deal more money, so they've accepted the principle that the government has to step in. They should now take its logic to its logical conclusion.
But
because they're now, in many ways, in the worst of all worlds.
But isn't it a question of the money coming from one source or the other? It's just which source it's coming from. It could be the left hand, it could be the right hand, but eventually the money will have to come from us who pay taxes.
Yes, but the whole point about taxes, they are relatively fair in that the more you earn, the more you pay. These tolls are completely undiscriminatory. It doesn't matter what you earn, you'll pay the same amount per kilometre, and that is what is so basically unfair. Particularly, it's been quite wrongly suggested that this is a campaign of the rich who drive their cars all over the place. But it isn't. A lot of workers have to drive to work because there's no public transport alternative. And they will be going through these tolls day in, day out. And even with the cap of 550, if you're on 5,000 rand a month, which many workers still are, that's more than 1/10 of your income.
It is a lot.
And don't forget that it's coming at the same time as increases in the fuel price, increase in the fuel levy, electricity going up on the 1st of April. And the tolls themselves, we believe, will have indirect effects on prices as well because of the extra cost of transporting goods around the country.
Some people are asking why you combined this strike on e-tolling with labour brokers, because there's a lot of anger against e-tolls, but at the same time, combining with the labour brokers, some people are suggesting you may lose support of people who would ordinarily just have wanted to march on one thing and one thing alone, the e-tolls.
Possibly, but you can imagine the outcry from business if we'd said, no, we're not going to have two national stoppages. Sorry, we're not going to have one national stoppage, we're going to have two national stoppages. Surely it makes sense to have one day in which we can focus on different issues. To some extent, there is a regional difference. The tolling is a huge issue in Gauteng, but obviously not such a big issue in Lusikisiki. But the labour brokers is a big issue everywhere. So there is a certain synergy.
What about the argument that labour brokers actually are a more efficient way of allocating resources where the economy needs those resources, those jobs?
Well, efficiency in whose interests?
In the interest of business.
From the employer's point of view,
if a business is more efficient, it's able to create more jobs.
No, they don't create more jobs. They simply can operate more efficiently because they don't have to waste their time worrying about the conditions under which their workers work. The labour broker deals with all that, usually deals with it very badly, and the person who actually uses the services of these workers can wash their hands and say, well, it's nothing to do with us. It's the labour brokers, and if the workers complain, they simply have to phone up the labour broker and say, I don't like this lot, take him away and bring another lot on Monday.
For the record, how many people are you expecting tomorrow across the country?
It's impossible to give numbers, but it will be very, very large. And I'll come back tomorrow and tell you how many.
What's a large number?
A large number is in 6 figures, and I think we can expect that.